The Children Act is a film that I've been meaning to watch since it came out, and I definitely didn't mean to leave it the best part of 8 years. But I will say it was absolutely worth the wait. This was released, of course, in 2017. It's directed by Richard Eyre, written by Ian McEwan, and we have a cast including Emma Thompson, Stanley Tucci, and Fionn Whitehead. And this is about a boy, a 17-year-old boy called Adam, who is a Jehovah's Witness. His parents are Jehovah's Witnesses, and Adam has leukemia. So he and his parents don't want him to get a transfusion. It's against their religion. But the Children Act, 1989, says that the court can determine whether or not Adam will actually get the transfusion. Now, this is based on the novel, The Children Act, written by Ian McEwan, which is apparently based on, or loosely based on, a true story. And I think that that's so fascinating. And I genuinely don't know where I stand on this. Because basically, in the film, they're saying, well, even though it's against Adam's religion and against his parents' religion, the court can say, well, actually, no, you're underage, you're a minor, so you are going to have that blood transfusion. And I genuinely don't know how I feel about that, because why does the court get to decide who lives or dies if it's against that person's religion? Now, I think today, the right to die, this is something that's being heavily discussed in the UK at the moment, would really put that into question a bit more. And I genuinely don't know where people would stand on that. And I don't know where I stand. But at the same time, if somebody doesn't want to receive treatment just because they're underage, should that not be taken into consideration? And why does being 1 year younger than of age, when he turns 18, of course, why does that mean the court gets to decide that his religious beliefs don't matter? And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. And I think for the most part, the Children Act exists to make sure that the child's welfare is met and that their health and their needs are met properly, regardless of the parent's religion. But when you're 17, if you have deep religious beliefs, is it fair for the court to say, well, actually, we don't care what you believe, you're getting the transfusion? And I feel like I just don't understand how anybody can think that it's right, but also that it's wrong, because a child deserves to live. And are they old enough to make their own decision? The point there is that I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I also think maybe part of me is leaning towards, if their religion says that they don't want this treatment or they can't have this treatment, why should some random court-appointed person get to say, actually, no, you're getting the treatment? It's really disrespectful. But again, if it's a child, are they really old enough to make their own decisions? Well, that is the big question, of course. So I felt a lot of different things when watching this. I thought for me it would be mostly about the emotional journey of a young boy having leukemia. And yes, that was, of course, emotional. But at the same time, I don't know if I agree with the overall concept of the court getting to say that somebody's religious beliefs don't matter. And I also feel like the parents not advocating for their son's life but putting their religion first, that was also frustrating. And I realised those thoughts are quite contradictory. It should be about the individual. I would never, if somebody wanted, let's say I was a parent and I had a child, obviously in reality it could be a different situation, but in theory I would imagine that if my religion, which it doesn't, but if my religion said you can't get a blood transfusion, but my child was on their deathbed and they needed a transfusion and they wanted a transfusion, I would feel like nothing in my religion would prevent that child from getting healthy. So while I was partly thinking, why does the court think it gets to say that their religion doesn't matter, at least Adam's religion, I was also thinking, how dare you as parents bring a child into this world and let them suffer like that? So I was torn. I was being thrown back and forth with what I thought should happen, with what I think was best for Adam. On the one hand, get the court-appointed treatment. On the other, how dare you disregard his religious beliefs? And I think the point there is that it's a very challenging film to watch. If you're not religious, it might not be. And I think it'll be a very different experience depending on where you're coming from. I will say the film went in a direction I wasn't really liking. The character of Adam went in a direction I didn't really care for. That's not to say it's not believable. I think his actions after a certain point definitely, I think, would make sense within the context of the story. I don't want to go into too much detail without spoiling it, but he started to behave in a certain way that I didn't like. And it kind of made me not like the character very much, even though, again, given all of the emotional upheaval, the way his parents are considering his life, or not considering it as the case may be, I feel like his response to things, and in particular his response to Fiona Maye, the Honourable Mrs. Justice Maye, I feel like it was very believable, but I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't find it entertaining. I didn't find it that thought-provoking. I mostly just found it a little peculiar. So I didn't love the second half of the film. But the first half I thought was really interesting. It made me think about a lot. And as I said, I've gone back and forth constantly when watching this film with who is in the right. I will say I don't think the parents are in the right. Adam's parents, honestly, I think they're horrible people. Because they're basically putting their beliefs ahead of Adam's life. And it's not that they were saying, well, our son's religion says this. They were definitely saying, our religion says this. And it's not about you. It's not your time to put your religion in the forefront. Obviously, with Adam having the same religion, it's a different story. But there were times when I was thinking, well, it's Adam's religion. It's his life. It's his death. Who lets the court play God? Because ultimately, that's what's happening. The court is deciding whether Adam lives or dies, assuming it's a successful transfusion, and I'm not going to say what happens there, but that is ostensibly what is being presented. Either Adam, if he were older, by a year, probably not even a year, he would get to choose whether he lives or dies by refusing the treatment. But because he's a year younger, the court gets to decide if he lives or dies. And that means the court is playing God. But why do they get to play God but disregard his religion? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, but the film did make me think a lot about that. And it made me quite frustrated at times because I was thinking, well, it's his religion, it's his beliefs, it's his right. But I was also thinking, this is all because of his parents. His current view, his religion is all because of his parents. And at 17, how much can you really have your own thoughts? Speaking as a former 17-year-old, when I look back at that time, I know that a lot of my own thoughts and beliefs were still being formed. So Adam is basically living under his parents and has been brought up with their beliefs. He hasn't had the time to form his own beliefs. So if the transfusion is successful, maybe in 20, 30 years, he'll look back and realise, yeah, that was not my religion. Those were not my beliefs. They were the beliefs of my parents. And that's when I think the court is doing the right thing. So I just went back and forth throughout the entire film, trying to work out who was in the right. And I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. Again, if you're not religious, then you might have a very different reaction to this, and I'd love to know what you think. As a story, I guess to sum all of that up, I've done a lot of waffling. To sum it all up, it's a very confusing situation. It made me think a lot. I felt a lot. And honestly, it's more frustrating than anything else, but it's a very well-written story, at least for the first half. Didn't love what happened in the second half. But at the end of the day, I came away from it with a lot of thoughts, a lot of jumbled thoughts. I'm not necessarily saying that what I feel is concrete or does not contradict itself, because it does. But I think that that's the sign of a good film. A film that makes me question so much. And the frustration is not the questioning, but the lack of answers. The lack of knowing what I really want to feel or how I should really think. And that's pretty impressive for a film to stir so much up inside of me. First half, very strong. Second half, I can see what they were trying to do, but I didn't love it. Performances were great. I love Emma Thompson. So a lot of really strong aspects of this film. And honestly, I think it's one that will stay with me for a while. Not just in terms of the narrative, but I will probably for a very long time be trying to weigh in my mind what the right thing to do was. Save a child, disregard his religion, or listen to his religion, and don't save a child who hasn't really yet reached a point in his life to form his own beliefs, because his beliefs are shaped largely by his parents' beliefs. So, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Either way, The Children Act is a powerful film. First half's better than the second half, but I still enjoyed it throughout, and it definitely has left me with a lot of pretty fascinating, kind of frustrating, but certainly very important questions.